I'm sorry. How long did you write that novel? 1 month, 1 year?
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 years. 2 years.
So how many pages every day?
Well, it's 4 or 5, 6, something like that. But and then rewritten many, many times. So it's hard because some days if I'm rewriting 6 pages that I've already done, in a way it seems easier, but in another way you're pulling it apart and putting it back together again. The hardest days are the days in the very first draft when you've never written it before. So, but that's about what it is, I think.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you seen the mechanical swan at the Bose Museum?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay, because in one of the reviews of your book there was a link to it, and it said within the review that you surely must have seen it.
They were right. They were right.
It's rather fascinating.
They were wrong about everything else, but right about that. I was talking to the conservator at the V&A at the very, very beginning, and I was trying to get information about Falk and Son's duck, which didn't really, I think, live as long as a human being. And when it was seen, I don't know whether Goethe was one of the last people to see it, but it was in a disgraceful state, you know. And there were photographs of it looking so sad and ragged, and it was it pretended something. It was a fake in many ways as well. So I was talking to her about this, and she didn't know much about it, but she said, the Bose Museum have this wonderful silver swan. And I said, oh, can I see a photograph of it? And she said, well, you can do better than that, actually. You just go to YouTube and type in silver swan. So I did that, and there it was, this sinuous, gorgeous, beautiful thing. And it's not only that, but they had just finished, not so long before, restoring it. And they'd kept a really detailed diary of the work, day by day by day by day. I can't remember, 40 days, or it might have been more than that. And of course, I'm a mechanical idiot. But if I have characters who have to know about mechanical things, I have to know about what they're doing, and all their emotional life and all of the things that they want and need are going to be sort of felt through the actions that they have to perform, like if it's restoring or making a swan. So the swan was not only beautiful, but I had all the information, and then I could talk to the horologist who actually did the work, and so on and so on. So that was just, I couldn't say no to that. But on the other hand, I couldn't let go of the duck either, because the duck is such a comic sort of a notion, and the notion that someone would head off to Germany in the middle of the 19th century with this duck, whose great trick, fake trick, but was that it not only ate but defecated, and which the little boy appears to have loved very much, even though his mother thought it was vulgar and awful. So I thought, I'm not going to let go of this duck because I love the duck, but I've got to have the swan because that's brilliant, and now I know what to do. So, as so often, with writing fiction, you have these two different things and you want them both. So clearly what that indicates, in the middle, there is somebody who's going to be asked to make a duck and they're going to make a swan instead. And that's a very attractive notion to me, because I begin to glimpse immediately as sort of a rather willful, slightly megalomaniacal character who sort of is rather like, he's got the sort of conceits of an artist when faced with a patron, that the patron's an idiot and doesn't know anything, and the patron should just give him the money and let him do what he wants to do, and he won't show him anything until he's done it anyway. So thus is born the character of Herr Sumper, who's the clockmaker in Germany, who Henry Brandling will commission. And somebody pointed out to me that it's not the first time I've had a character like this. They said, why do you like these sort of mad, willful people who, like your poet, they said, in My Life as a Fake is a little bit like this character. And I said, well, you think about it.
What was it that set you off to write Parrot and Olivier? Was it something about this country?
Oh, yes. What set me off to write Parrot and Olivier wasn't something in this country. Yes, it was. I was was during the last dance of the Bush administration, and one of the great things about having two passports or having your heart in two places is that you're always not quite sure about your place in it or where you belong or why. So America can occasionally be me, but quite often it's you, they, and so I'm thinking, well, what is happening here? Why has this got like this? Why are we in such a sorry state? And I've always had a suspicion that my friends in talking about Tocqueville's Democracy in America had maybe not read the whole book. I hadn't read it at all. But I started to think, this is probably something they've been taught, this is at school. No one's read this whole book. They've been reading the good stuff. They've been reading the stuff where the French aristocrat says, what a fabulous thing this young democracy is. I love it, I love it, I love it. And there are parts that are like that if you want to read it. But when you read the whole book, which I then did, it's like you could see that Tocqueville could see now. And I mean, this is not to disparage any of the great presidents of this country, but Tocqueville does ask, well, what happens if you have an idiot who's president? More or less in those words. And so there were many other things that he asked, and so I thought this is rather interesting. And so I had this notion of, when Tocqueville came here, he came with Beaumont, so there were these two very, very clever, amazingly smart aristocrats, lawyers, who talked to each other continually about what this country might mean and about democracy and the unstoppable wave of democracy in France, which they accepted. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be maybe more interesting in the sense of a novel for him to travel with a servant who might have a completely different class attitude to everything, and that they might hate each other, and in the end form some sort of unlikely, very unlikely, more unlikely than a excreting mechanical duck, a friendship. And so that's sort of where I started. I was just sort of looking at and there's all sorts of things that are in democracy in America. I mean, one of the things that I maybe somebody's written about. One of the things I thought was extraordinary about Tocqueville is that you realize he is the child of survivors of the revolution, aristocratic survivors of the revolution. The grandfather has been executed. All their friends, so many of the family's friends have been executed. What a household to grow up in! And they used to gather and sing songs in secret with the servants out of the room about the king, And so it's clearly a traumatized household that he's grown up in, and it's a household in which the role of the mob, for instance, is terrifying. And here's this young man growing up in this place. So I thought that was something about Tocqueville that I hadn't read about. Now maybe some of you have read things that I hadn't read, but it seemed to me rather clever and original. And so I sort of pursued that as a notion about the character, and it did seem to illuminate another thing. The other thing also about Tocqueville is that, and maybe you agree with this opinion, that he is an aristocrat. He really, really, really is an aristocrat. But everyone said he wasn't a snob. Well, no. So my character is very disdainful of all sorts of things. America and New York and everyone eating ham all the time and this sort of awful wine or whatever it is that's going on. Tocqueville did that all the time. And Tocqueville also said in a letter to his father, it is not always advisable to tell the truth. He was quite aware of what he was writing in the order. So I think I got quite a lot of room to move on that. But I did always try to respect the possibilities of my parallel story as being not unreasonable in the light of what they are mirroring or reflecting or bouncing off. So, yes.